Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans and miss it each night and day? Money, you've got lots of friends.
That you first heard Billie Holiday?
She would take a pop tune, sing it at each table, and she'd sing it entirely differently every time.
Billie Holiday was the immortal symbol of jazz, a raspy voice that once left all of America breathless. She didn't just sing, she cried out the pain of an entire generation through Strange Fruit, one of the most haunting songs in U.S. history. But behind the spotlight was an ending no one expected, handcuffed to a hospital bed, dying alone with just 70 cents in her pocket, no funeral, no one to see her off. It seemed as though the tragedy had ended there, but the truth had not. A white mansion, abandoned for over 60 years, a hidden contract buried beneath the floorboards, and each year on her birthday, a strange voice still heard echoing from the music room. What really happened to Billie Holiday? Who stole her life and legacy? And why has her final home never been claimed? All of it will be revealed in today's video. A story not just about the death of an artist, but a heartbreaking indictment written in the margins of music history. Billie Holiday was the name that stirred American music from the 1930s to the late 1950s. She wasn't just a singer, she was a wave that shook the core of jazz. She was the first black woman to make Carnegie Hall fall completely silent with a single note. Billie Holiday forced the nation to confront its conscience through every word of Strange Fruit. She wrote proud, aching loneliness in her own blood and tears through God Bless the Child. Everyone knows Billie Holiday as a legend, but very few know that she spent the last years of her life in an old, worn-down mansion tucked deep on the edge of Harlem. A place no one paid attention to, a place never once mentioned by the press. That house was called White Gardenia House, and inside was a maze of mysteries that had never been solved. The objects left behind, all of them holding fragmented clues pointing to something no one dared to name. Could that be where Billie Holiday spent her final days, controlled, forgotten, and quietly destroyed in silence? White Gardenia was not just a mansion. It was the very first clue to the darkest chapter in the life of a truly great voice. On a quiet street tucked between the worn buildings of Old Sugar Hill in Harlem stands a two-story white-painted house that almost no one notices. It has no nameplate, no doorbell. Only wild gardenia trees grow thick around the front yard, hiding nearly the entire facade from view. Locals call it by a vague, haunting name, White Gardenia House. And perhaps it was here that the final years of Billie Holiday drifted by, quietly, like a song that never ends. The house she chose covered nearly 2,500 square feet with 2 floors, 5 bedrooms, a small library, a music room lined with dark hardwood floors, and a backyard filled entirely with white gardenias, the very flower Billie often wore in her hair while performing. The home's architecture bore the charm of early 20th century Americana, yet certain features defied explanation. A door in the attic that led nowhere, a 5th bedroom permanently locked from the inside with no visible doorknob. Some say that when night falls, wind slipping through the hallway windows creates a soft humming sound, like a voice singing faintly just for itself. Though the house stood at the edge of the city, it felt cut off from the world. The front door stayed ajar, its rusted hinges groaning each time a gust passed through the cold corridor. Inside, thick dust blanketed everything. The floorboards bowed, an armchair lay tilted as if someone had left in the middle of sitting. In the music room, the upright piano was missing several keys. A piece of sheet music still rested on the stand, its final line scribbled out. Upstairs, everything looked like it had just been abandoned. Most striking was a large mirror covered by an old faded cloth. In the closet hung a white dress, now yellowed and stiff with time, and in the center of the bedroom floor, one loose plank showed signs of having once been pried up. That, people say, was where Billie hid the last of her money, her remaining royalties, stashed away in silence. This was also the home she shared with her final husband. But no one, not even the walls themselves, could fully recount what really happened behind that half-closed door. During the day, Billie would walk the house slowly, silently, her footsteps barely making a sound. At night, the only thing audible was the soft creak of the door hinge as wind pushed through the hallway. Louis McKay was present in every room, not like a husband, but more like a shadow that followed her every move. No one knew that this would become the burial ground for the woman they once called Lady Day. Today, that house still stands, quietly at a forgotten corner of Harlem, as if time itself had stopped around it. The front door remains slightly open, neither locked nor welcoming, as though waiting for someone who never returned. Stranger still, a clock in the living room, one Billie bought during a tour in Chicago, is frozen at exactly 3:17 p.m., unmoving, as if preserving a moment that refuses to be erased. To truly understand what happened behind those white walls, we must go back, far back, to where the pain began. Before the stage, before the haunting songs. From the very beginning, Billie Holiday never had a place to truly call home. Born in Philadelphia in the spring of 1915 as Eleanora Fagan, she was the result of a brief teenage love affair that was never acknowledged. Her father, Clarence Holiday, a street musician, disappeared while she was still in the crib. Her mother, Sadie, was barely more than a child herself, still learning how to grow up, now forced to learn how to be a mother in a world that had no room for either of them. Billie grew up among the sound of train whistles, the scent of sawdust, and the quiet moans that escaped from the shanties of Baltimore. She dropped out of school in the 5th grade, not because she lacked ability, but because there was simply no place for a child who had always been left behind by the adults around her. Her childhood was a series of drifting days, passed from place to place like something no one wanted to keep. When her mother had to work far from home, Billie was sent to reform schools because there was no one willing to care for her. These places were no different from small prisons for children, silent, isolating, and built to extinguish the dreams of little black girls. One afternoon in October of 1927, Billie Holiday was pulled from her row of classmates and locked inside a disciplinary room. Her crime, singing too loudly. The iron door slammed shut behind her. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner of the room, Billie froze in horror. There, curled up on the floor, was the body of another girl, hair tangled, face covered, long gone cold. Billie was just 12, too terrified to cry, too young to understand why someone would lock a child in a room with death. She didn't know yet that she was growing up in a time where a poor black child was more likely to be punished than protected. Sitting there in the dark for what felt like forever, Billie did the only thing she could to stay sane. She sang, not for joy, not for an audience, but to push back the silence, to keep herself from falling apart. Years later, Billie would leave that reform school behind, but the wound from that locked room never truly healed. The fear of being left alone in the dark, the memory of that cold body in the corner, and that first terrified song she sang in panic. All of it became a crack too deep to ever seal in the soul of a girl who had just turned 12. After her release, Billie began singing in bars and small nightclubs around Harlem. It was in those dimly lit corners that her voice began to shine, raspy, raw, and soaked in a kind of sorrow no one could name. One spring night in 1933, in a smoky little club nestled in the chaos of Midtown, Billie's voice floated above the haze of cigarettes and scattered laughter. She was only 18, but her voice felt like it had lived 100 years. People started to take notice. She was soon invited to larger stages, performing with legendary bands like Count Basie and later Artie Shaw. One of the rare times a black female singer was allowed to share the stage with white musicians, even if it meant stepping forward to sing and quietly disappearing backstage afterward. But those tours were far from glamorous. Traveling through the segregated South, Billie wasn't allowed to use the main elevators, wasn't allowed to dine with the band, and was often told to wait in supply closets until her name was called to perform. During one performance in Philadelphia, a white man in the audience hurled a racial slur at her mid-song. Billie stopped, but the show went on, and no newspaper mentioned what happened. Still, that silence became something she carried into every recording afterward, like a quiet, lingering ache hidden inside each note. By the late 1930s, after hundreds of nights on stage, after slipping through back entrances of clubs that had her name on the marquee but never her place at the table, Billie Holiday began to understand something deeper. Her voice wasn't just for entertainment, it was becoming a protest. And in 1939, that protest took on its most unforgettable form, in a song called Strange Fruit. The song was just over 3 minutes long, but its lyrics cut through America's conscience like a blade. Strange Fruit painted a chilling picture. Black bodies swinging from southern trees, described as strange fruit. The audience froze, but Billie didn't back down. Once released, the song immediately became a symbol, not just of music, but of rage, resistance, and the unbreakable spirit of Black America. From that moment on, Billie's voice was no longer just a melody. It became a threat. Under the leadership of Harry Anslinger, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics marked Billie Holiday as a danger, a woman who sang the truth, and for that, they wanted her silenced. On an autumn night in 1940 in Chicago, backstage at a small theater, Billie Holiday sat quietly in front of the mirror, gently adjusting the white gardenia flower in her hair, a familiar ritual before every performance. The room was dimly lit, casting soft shadows across her tired face after countless sleepless nights. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hallway. A strange man stopped at her door. He didn't knock, didn't speak. Wearing a long coat and a low-brimmed hat that obscured half his face, he stared at Billie with a cold intensity, a silent warning that needed no words. He stood there for only a few seconds, then turned and disappeared, leaving behind a chill that settled over the room like a heavy fog. After the show that night, tucked among the bouquet of bright flowers a fan had sent, Billie found something hard and unusual. As she peeled back the wrapping, she uncovered a small device the size of her palm, a hidden microphone and antenna, carefully concealed within a single stem. It was a listening device. From that night on, everything changed. Promised gigs were canceled without explanation. Calls to producers went unanswered. Promoters who once welcomed her with open arms suddenly grew distant. Billie Holiday had been blacklisted. No official notice, no paperwork, just a cold stare, and a bouquet wired to destroy her. But that wasn't the only thing pulling her under. Her romantic life, one marred by pain, was quietly breaking her. In 1941, Billie married Jimmy Monroe, a flashy but violent man who brought her not only a wedding ring, but her first taste of opium. When that marriage crumbled, she turned to Joe Guy, a trumpet player in the band. He replaced wine with heroin during their long, sleepless nights. By 1945, she was with John Levy, her boyfriend and manager. He became the first to orchestrate betrayal behind her back. Billie loved deeply, but each time she gave her heart, she lost another piece of herself. The men who came and went, from Jimmy with his drug-laced cigarettes, to Joe with his heroin doses, to Levy with his contracts she never got to read, each played a part in building the quiet prison that Billie never realized she was locked inside. No one forced her into ruin, but each one left behind a trace of addiction, a broken habit, a crack too deep to mend. And then, inevitably, the collapse came. In the spring of 1947, while the stage lights still clung to her face after a performance in San Francisco, Billie Holiday was arrested in her room at the Mark Twain Hotel. The charge, possession and use of narcotics. She didn't fight. She only asked for treatment. But no one heard her plea. To Harry Anslinger, Billie wasn't just an addict. She was a threat. A black woman with influence who dared to sing about lynching, who dared to turn truth into art in a country desperate to forget. She had no strong legal defense. She wasn't sent to rehab as she hoped, but was instead sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison at Alderson, West Virginia, a place Billie would later call the cemetery for dreams that never got a second chance. After serving her sentence, Billie Holiday walked out of prison like a stranger in a world that had once cheered her name. The elite clubs that once lit up their marquees with her name now refused to grant her performance licenses. No license, no stage, no spotlight for the woman who once silenced Carnegie Hall. And just when every door began to close, one man stepped in, Louis McKay, who claimed to be her husband, her manager, her last hope. At first, Billie believed he was her savior. McKay arranged bookings in smaller cities, got her studio time with independent labels. But slowly, everything she owned began slipping out of her name. Contracts, royalties, even bank accounts were signed over to McKay. Billie never saw a paycheck, didn't know how much she was owed, and didn't have a key to the house she lived in. Whatever was handed to her, she signed. During a studio visit in 1958, a staff accountant was shocked to find Billie had no tax ID, no verified bank account. She merely shrugged and said, "I don't need a bank, I've got nothing to put in one." Records from the time confirmed she owned nothing, no property, no rights to her music, no access to her royalties. There were rumors Billie had stashed cash beneath a loose floorboard upstairs in the Gardenia house, a survival instinct after too many betrayals. But when the house was inspected later, the board was empty. Just scratch marks, a forgotten rusted box, and no key in sight. So in the final years of a once magnificent career, Billie Holiday sang night after night without knowing what she was being paid. She lived in a house not under her name, performing songs she wrote, but no longer owned. It was as if each note she sang had been quietly taken down and signed by someone else. After years of addiction and toxic relationships, Billie Holiday's body began to collapse without warning. Her liver was failing, her heart was weakening, and each day her breath grew shorter. The arm that once held a microphone on grand stages was now marked with long scars from old needles. The fingers that once gently touched guitar strings trembled uncontrollably, unable to hold any rhythm. In early May of 1959, on a damp and gray afternoon, Billie collapsed inside her rented apartment in Midtown. A neighbor found her semi-conscious, lying on her side near the kitchen sink, still holding a glass of cold water she hadn't had the strength to drink. Her fingernails were turning purple, her lips cracked, her skin pale and cold, and her abdomen swollen from severe fluid retention. The ambulance arrived late, and at first, the driver didn't even recognize the frail woman barely clinging to life. She was admitted to room 6B at Metropolitan Hospital in New York in critical condition. Her skin had yellowed, her entire body was bloated, and she was barely conscious. In the first few days, she couldn't sit up, only breathing in sharp, shallow gasps, as if borrowing air from a world already slipping away. The doctor shook his head. The nurse scribbled brief notes in silence. There was no family present, no one to sign her papers. And in that cold, quiet room, Billie Holiday lay alone, her breath fractured, her limbs curling in on themselves, trembling as though even the pain itself had grown too exhausted to continue haunting her. But even then, she wasn't allowed peace. On the morning of July 12, 1959, Billie Holiday lay motionless, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes sunken, lips cracked from dehydration. After 2 months of battling end-stage liver failure, she had only the faintest breath left and no light in her eyes. At 9:30 a.m., 2 federal agents entered her room. In their hands was a warrant for her arrest, possession of narcotics, based on a tip from an anonymous source. As her doctor adjusted the IV drip, Billie's right wrist was quietly cuffed to the bed rail. The sound of metal against iron rang out like the final note in a song that would never be forgiven. The new, gleaming handcuff gently cut into the swollen wrist of the woman who once performed Strange Fruit. A nurse considered speaking up, but fell silent upon meeting the gaze of the officer stationed outside the door. Fan letters were intercepted at the nurse's station. A bouquet of flowers was confiscated as evidence. Even the handwritten note Billie kept in her purse, intended for her mother in case of her death, was seized for evidence review. The room grew quieter than any stage Billie had ever graced, with only the heart monitor ticking off disjointed numbers, as if counting down the final seconds of a life whose ending no one could quite remember. Though officially arrested on July 12, 1959, Billie Holiday was not taken to jail. Her body was too weak, her liver failing, her breath shallow, her eyes unable to stay open for more than a few minutes. Doctors knew she wouldn't survive more than a few days, so the police left her at Metropolitan Hospital, but never stopped watching. 2 officers stood guard outside room 6B around the clock. All mail, fresh flowers, and gifts from fans were confiscated. She was completely cut off from the outside world, as if serving a sentence within 4 white walls, colder than any prison. Her right wrist remained handcuffed to the bed frame, even though she lacked the strength to lift her hand. Each time she moved, the metal tightened against her swollen skin, leaving bruises that never had time to fade. Meanwhile, Billie's condition worsened by the hour. She began to hallucinate, calling out for her mother, then for the men who had abandoned her. Once, a nurse found a small, yellowed piece of paper under her pillow, scrawled with the words, "If I don't make it, play Don't Explain." On the morning of July 17, 1959, around 3 a.m., the heart monitor fell silent. Billie Holiday died as an unnamed individual, leaving no will. No one was by her side. At the foot of the bed, the handcuff remained locked. On the table, her medical file concluded with a single line: "Subject deceased before processing completed." Immediately after, the hospital reviewed her personal belongings and discovered a shocking truth. Her purse contained exactly 70 cents. She had no savings account, no music rights in her name. The recordings that had made history were circulating across America, but her name was no longer part of the profit sharing. No legal next of kin came to claim her body, and no friends were in a position to arrange a funeral. The press later reported briefly, "Singer Billie Holiday dies at 44. A small line nestled between market news and the weather. What was never mentioned was the detail in the administrative file. She died while still in custody, as a subject under investigation. Even her body was held for 2 days due to pending legal procedures, meaning no one was allowed to touch her until the police signed the release order, after she had already died. A housekeeping staff member recounted that under Billie's pillow was an old yellowed photograph of her with her mother, its edges cracked. In the coat pocket beside her bed, an unpaid bill for her last month's rent was found, the apartment from which she had been evicted just weeks earlier for non-payment. When the morgue called the various addresses Billie had previously listed, all numbers were disconnected. Eventually, her body was transported in a standard medical vehicle. No hearse, no candles, no music. A name that had once silenced America now fell into eerie stillness, as if Billie Holiday had never existed in the annals of music history. After Billie passed, the small white painted house on the edge of Harlem, White Gardenia House, was abandoned. According to city records, the house had never belonged to Billie Holiday. The sole listed owner was Louis McKay, her last husband, who had controlled all her finances and life. But after Billie's death, McKay vanished from all related proceedings. Ownership rights were frozen due to silent disputes among parties lacking sufficient legal grounds. The city had planned to clear the area in the late 1960s, but that particular house, by some strange twist, remained standing. A technical glitch in the land registry system rendered the house unsellable, indestructible, and untransferable. All related records disappeared as if it had never existed. Neighbors recalled that every April 7th, Billie's birthday, from behind the decaying first-floor door, a faint singing voice could be heard, just one line, then silence, light as the wind, cold as a final breath. In 1972, a local survey team was permitted to enter the house to inspect the foundation. While removing the rotted wooden floor in the second-floor bedroom, they discovered a small hollow space containing an old, rusted, unlocked metal box. Inside, they found a handwritten recording contract with smudged red ink, a small notebook with unpublished song lyrics, and an unsent letter with shaky handwriting. "If anyone reads this, please don't let my voice be bought forever." No one knew why Billie hid those items there. No one dared remove them from the house. From that day on, everyone who entered the house reported the same thing. They heard someone rehearsing from the downstairs music room. Each sound occurred only once, then vanished, as if Billie, though gone, was still watching over herself. Though she lived in poverty, died in solitude, and left no official will, Billie Holiday left behind an asset that could not be seized, bought, or buried by time: her voice. Over 300 recordings still exist today, from the tearful lover man to the unforgettable indictment of American history titled Strange Fruit. those scratched vinyl records were once banned from radio stations led to her being investigated, arrested, and expelled from clubs. Yet, after all, they were the only things Billie truly owned, paid for with blood, tears, and a life decayed in addiction and betrayed loves. Today, Billie Holiday's music is not only replayed on radio waves. It resonates in museums, films, and in the hearts of those who have tasted pain and endured injustice. Her voice, wavering, cracked, trembling but never offbeat, remains proof of one thing. Even when the world handcuffed her to a hospital bed, Billie never stayed silent. The abandoned white Gardenia house still stands at the corner of 149th Street, unnamed on real estate maps, with no legal records, no new residents, and no one daring to tear it down. The peeling walls, broken piano keys, and covered mirror all seem to preserve the last space Billie ever called home. The only place that witnessed a woman stripped of fame, fortune, and love, yet still holding on to her voice until the very end. And perhaps that is her true legacy, a voice that never died, a house owned by no one, filled with grievances, a life that blazed, then faded, but was never forgotten.